The courtroom was silent except for the clicking of the judge's pen. Everyone was watching him, a tall man in his late 60s, dressed in a neatly pressed U.S. Army uniform. He sat straight, unmoving, like a statue of discipline, with rows of colorful ribbons pinned to his chest. You could tell he wasn't just any man. He carried something: weight, history, pain in his eyes. But that didn't stop the judge. "I don't know who you think you are," Judge Holloway said, not raising his voice but injecting each word with cold authority. "But this is a court of law, not a military parade." The courtroom stirred. A woman in the back gasped. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Even the prosecutor looked uneasy. The judge leaned forward. "Veteran or not, wearing a uniform in a civilian court is not only inappropriate, it's disrespectful. This is not the place for medals." The veteran didn't flinch. "Sir," he said, his voice gravelly but calm. "May I speak?" Judge Holloway paused, perhaps expecting a yes man. "Go on," he said. The veteran stood. Every motion was precise, intentional, like he had rehearsed it 1,000 times. His name was Harold Jenkins, 73 years old, retired master sergeant. 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm. The kind of man who saw more in a year than most do in a lifetime. "I wore this uniform," he began, "because today is the anniversary of the day I lost 7 men under my command. Every the 10th of April I wear it. Not for me, for them." The room went still. "I wasn't going to come to court today," he said. "But my granddaughter begged me. She said if I didn't show up, the state would take her son, my great-grandson. He's all she has, and I'm all she has." Judge Holloway's face changed. Slightly. Barely. But it changed. "I don't expect you to understand, Your Honor. But these medals, they're not decorations. They're reminders. This Purple Heart," he said, tapping it gently, "was earned the day I carried my best friend half a mile through sniper fire. He didn't make it." Now his voice cracked. "This ribbon? That was the day we held off 100 men in Fallujah, with nothing but sandbags and grit. We lost 3 guys in 3 hours. I was the only one left standing." He looked around. "I don't wear this uniform to show off. I wear it because they can't. I wear it so I never forget." Silence. For 10 long seconds, not a single person spoke. The judge stared at Jenkins, eyes unreadable. Then he looked down at his bench and took a deep breath. "I understand now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, continue." But Jenkins wasn't done. "Your Honor, I spent most of my life following orders, but I'm not here to ask for special treatment. I'm here because a young mother made a mistake, and now the state wants to take her child. That child has a home. With me." He pulled out a folded photo from his breast pocket and held it up. "This is Jimmy. He's 3 years old. He likes dinosaurs and hates vegetables. He calls me Papa. He's never known his dad, and his mom's been struggling with addiction. But she's trying, and I won't let him go into the system." Tears welled in the eyes of the court reporter. One of the jurors quietly wiped their face. Jenkins looked at the judge, resolute. "You want to punish me for wearing this uniform? Go ahead. I've been punished before, but don't take my great-grandson away from the only family he has." The judge sat back, no longer the towering authority figure, just a man caught between the law and something far more powerful: truth. "I'll need a moment," he said, and retreated to his chambers. In his absence, murmurs filled the room. Not the kind of chatter that fills a space with noise, but the kind that carries reverence. Something sacred had happened, something raw, real. When Judge Holloway returned, he wasn't the same. "I've reviewed the details of this custody matter," he said. "And while I still believe courtroom decorum is important, I now realize that sometimes exceptions must be made." He turned to Jenkins. "Master Sergeant Jenkins, I apologize, not just for today, but for every time this country has made you feel unseen." Jenkins didn't move, just stood there, proud. "I'm granting temporary custody of James Holloway to you, effective immediately, with the opportunity for permanent custody pending a follow-up review." Gasps again. This time, of disbelief, gratitude, awe. But then Jenkins did something unexpected. He looked at the judge and said, "Sir, did you say Holloway?" The judge nodded. "Yes, James Holloway, my grandson. My son, his father, died in Afghanistan. I haven't seen that boy since he was born, his mother and I. We had a falling out." Now the room wasn't just silent. It was breathless. "I had no idea," Jenkins whispered. "Neither did I," the judge said. "Until I saw that photo. I recognized the eyes. My son's eyes." The courtroom was no longer a battleground of law and protocol. It was a bridge between two lives, two losses, two men who had never met but had always been connected. Judge Holloway's voice trembled, barely holding together. "I distanced myself after the funeral. I couldn't bear the grief, couldn't bear seeing James grow up without his father. So I disappeared from his life, selfishly." Jenkins took a breath, nodding slowly. "Grief does strange things to a man. But that boy, he needs us both." For a few seconds, the judge looked away, as if confronting the shadows he'd hidden from for years. "You said his mother's trying?" "She is," Jenkins replied. "Rehab for the second time. This one's different. She's been clean for 94 days. She wants her son back, but she needs time." Judge Holloway looked at Jenkins, searching for something. Then he said, "You're a good man. Not just for what you did out there," he gestured vaguely, "but for standing here now." Jenkins looked down at his boots. "A good man doesn't bury friends and walk away. I've done too much of both." And then came a moment that no one could have expected. The judge stood up, stepped down from the bench, walked slowly, deliberately, until he was face to face with Jenkins. He extended his hand. "Thank you for taking care of my grandson." Jenkins stared at the hand, then took it. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a transfer of something invisible: regret, respect, responsibility. "I'll do better this time," the judge whispered. Jenkins nodded. "So will I." The bailiff cleared his throat, the spell broken just slightly. "We still need to file paperwork for the custody transfer, Your Honor." Judge Holloway turned. "It will be done, but I want a clause added. If his mother remains clean for 6 months, we'll revisit custody. I believe in second chances." Jenkins smiled. "So do I." The session was adjourned, but no one moved. They weren't just witnesses to a court ruling, they had seen something deeper. A crack in the system where light had poured through. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Word had spread. Cameras clicked as Jenkins stepped outside, Jimmy in his arms, the boy's small hand clutching one of the medals on his uniform. A young reporter approached, microphone trembling slightly. "Sergeant Jenkins, what do you say to those who think the uniform didn't belong in that courtroom?" Jenkins adjusted the boy in his arms, looked the reporter dead in the eye. "It belonged because they didn't." "Who?" "The ones we lost. The ones who'll never stand in a courtroom, never raise a child, never speak their truth. I wore this for them." The crowd was quiet. Then, applause. Not loud, not raucous, just respectful. Jenkins didn't stay long. Fame wasn't his goal. His goal was already asleep on his shoulder, tiny breaths against his neck. In the days that followed, the video went viral. Millions watched the exchange between a judge and a veteran. Millions cried. But something else happened too. People reached out. Letters, emails, messages from other veterans, from grieving families, from estranged parents. People inspired by a courtroom confession and a tearful reunion. Jenkins didn't respond to many. He wasn't used to the attention. But there was one letter that stayed with him. It read, "Dear Sergeant Jenkins, I watched your video today. I'm a single mom. My husband died in Iraq, and I've been struggling with addiction for years. I gave up custody of my son 2 years ago. But after seeing you stand up for your granddaughter, for that boy, I called my counselor. I booked a spot in rehab. Thank you for reminding me that it's not too late. Amanda, Phoenix, AZ." Jenkins folded the letter and placed it in his wallet. Weeks passed. Life found its rhythm again. Every morning, Jimmy would wake up at 6 a.m., crawl into Jenkins's bed, and whisper, "Papa, I had a dream." And Jenkins would listen, not just with ears, but with his soul, because he had learned that the smallest voices often carried the deepest truths. And sometimes the uniform wasn't about war. Sometimes it was about peace. Sometimes the bravest thing a man could do was stay. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Jenkins stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, uniform jacket replaced by a worn flannel. Jimmy sat on the steps, wrapped in a dinosaur blanket, quietly watching ants march across the wood. "Why do ants work so hard, Papa?" the boy asked. Jenkins smiled. "Because they look out for each other. They never leave anyone behind." Jimmy nodded like that, made perfect sense, then returned to his silent observations. Mornings like this were precious, calm, predictable, but beneath them lay a fragile tension Jenkins knew it couldn't last forever. Nothing ever did. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was the rehab center. Jimmy's mother had relapsed. Jenkins sat in silence, the phone still pressed to his ear even after the call ended. He stared at the kitchen wall, the photo of Jimmy taped there with shaky crayon letters that said, "Me and Papa." He felt the old war rising inside again. Disappointment, helplessness, anger, but most of all, fear. That night, Jenkins called Judge Holloway. "I know what you're going to say," he started. "But I don't want the boy to know yet. He still thinks she's coming back next weekend." "I understand," Holloway said. "Let's not take that away from him." "Not yet." There was a pause. Then the judge asked, "And you? How are you holding up?" Jenkins didn't answer at first. "I've buried friends in desert heat. I've slept with one eye open in jungles that whispered death, but nothing prepares you for watching someone you love drown in a storm they created." Holloway didn't reply with platitudes. He just listened. The next morning, Jenkins did what he always did. He got up, made breakfast, brushed Jimmy's teeth, laughed at his knock-knock jokes. And when the boy asked, "Can we draw Mommy a card?" Jenkins nodded. "Of course." He watched as Jimmy scribbled stick figures and hearts. "Do you think she'll smile when she sees it?" the boy asked, hopeful. Jenkins' throat tightened. "I think she'll cry happy tears." That night, Jenkins pulled out a notebook. It was old, leather-bound, filled with names of men he'd served with. Notes about missions. But now, he began a new section. Letters. To Jimmy. To the boy he was raising. To the man he would one day become. "Dear Jimmy," he wrote, "there are two kinds of bravery. One is loud and fast, like running into a battlefield. The other is quiet and long, like staying when it's easier to leave. I hope you learn to do both." Each night he wrote more. Stories, lessons, hopes. Things his own son never lived long enough to hear. Weeks turned to months. Jimmy turned 4. He learned how to tie his shoes, say, "Excuse me," without being reminded, and whisper bedtime prayers with eyes scrunched tight. Jenkins aged too. The limp from his left knee got worse. His hands shook more often, but his resolve never did. One day, after a routine checkup at the VA hospital, his doctor sat him down. "We found something in your lung," she said softly. "We need more tests, but it's not nothing." Jenkins nodded. "Do what you need to do, but don't tell the boy." At home, he sat on the porch again, notebook in hand. Jimmy was chasing fireflies in the yard. "Dear Jimmy," he wrote, "one day, I won't be here to tell you these things in person, but I need you to remember, you were never a burden. You were my mission." Later that night, Jenkins tucked the notebook into the top drawer of his desk and locked it. He didn't know how long he had, but he knew what to do with the time he did. Winter arrived quietly, no fanfare, just a subtle grayness that settled over the town, Frost edged the windows, and the porch creaked differently under the weight of the cold. Inside, Jimmy was building a Lego spaceship, while Jenkins sat by the fire, the warmth soaking into his bones like memory. The diagnosis came back. Stage 3. Treatable, but not curable. Jenkins told no one. Not even Holloway. Not yet. Not until he had a plan. He picked up the notebook again. "Dear Jimmy," he wrote, "you're going to face moments when you feel alone. When people leave, or life changes faster than you're ready for. But I need you to remember, you are never truly alone. You carry the love of every person who ever believed in you." As the days shortened, Jenkins arranged meetings. A lawyer, to discuss custody. A doctor, to schedule treatment quiet, unobtrusive. And finally, one morning, he knocked on the judge's office door. "I need to talk," he said. Holloway looked up. "About Jimmy?" "About me," Jenkins replied, and he told him everything. When he finished, Holloway just sat there, stunned. "You should have told me sooner," he said. "I didn't want pity. I wanted a plan." The judge leaned back, eyes heavy. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to take him," Jenkins said. If the time comes, you're his blood. You've changed. I see that now." Holloway shook his head. "We both have." They didn't sign anything that day, but they shook hands again. And this time, it felt like more than an agreement. It felt like a promise. Spring crept in slowly. The chemo started. Jenkins lost weight, lost hair, but not his spirit. Jimmy noticed. "Papa, why are you getting skinny?" "Because I'm fighting something," Jenkins said, "but I'm winning." It wasn't a lie. Not completely. He was winning moments. Lego building. Pancake flipping. Slow walks through the park with Jimmy on his shoulders, laughing so hard he hiccuped. One night, Jenkins gave the boy the notebook. "This is for later," he said. "Much later." Jimmy, confused, hugged it anyway. "Does it have drawings?" "Not the kind you're used to," Jenkins smiled. As summer began, so did another change. Jimmy's mother returned. Clean, clear-eyed. She knelt before Jenkins, trembling. "I'm ready. I want to be his mom again. But only if you believe I can be." He looked at her for a long time. "You'll have to earn it. Not from me. From him." And she did. She came every day, cooked, read stories, took Jimmy to the park. She didn't rush it. She didn't beg. She showed up. 6 months later, Jenkins stood in court again. Same room, same bench, same judge. But now, the courtroom wasn't tense. It was sacred. "I believe she's ready," Jenkins said. "And I believe Jimmy is too." Judge Holloway looked at the boy, now 5, sitting on his mother's lap. "Do you want to live with Mommy?" Jimmy nodded. "But I still want Papa to visit." Everyone smiled. Jenkins didn't say much that day. He didn't need to. He'd done his job. Outside, as they stood in the sunlight, Holloway approached Jenkins. "You gave that boy a chance, and her too. You gave all of us a second shot." Jenkins looked at him, eyes tired but peaceful. It wasn't about giving. It was about holding on until they could take flight. 3 months later, Harold Jenkins passed away quietly in his sleep. On his nightstand was the folded letter from Amanda in Phoenix. And next to it, a drawing by Jimmy stick figures holding hands under a sky of stars, one of them wearing a big colorful uniform. At the funeral, there were no long speeches, no politicians, just friends, family, people who had watched a man turn a courtroom into a cathedral. Judge Holloway spoke last. He taught us what it means to serve, not just in war, but in peace, not just with medals, but with presence. He looked at Jimmy, sitting quietly in the front row, holding his mother's hand and the old leather notebook in the other. And he reminded us that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not on the battlefield, but in the home, in the heart. And with that, the service ended. But the story lived on. In letters, in memories, in one little boy who would grow up never forgetting the man who taught him how to be brave by simply staying.